All right, welcome back to another episode of Justice for Y'all. As always, here with Andrew Bowen and Stephen Morrison. I'm Paul Painter, and today we are going to talk about tort reform and its yes, and its history, how it comes about, and why it's one of the most misleading things you hear in media over the years. But
And an oxymoron.
and an oxymoron,
And just plain moronic.
And just plain moronic. Yes.
just dumb.
It's fancy moron and just plain moron.
Yes. Before we get to that, how y'all doing?
Doing good. We the three of us went to lunch yesterday at Desposito's and
Thunderbolt, yeah.
Thunderbolt, and it was excellent. It's the first time I'd been there since they have renovated it and reopened.
They did a great job. I mean, it's always been great food, and it was great food yesterday. But like before anybody who doesn't know Desposito's, it's always been kind of a little bit of a shack, and it's by a boat ramp over there. It's on the Wilmington River. You got to go over the bridge and then find this, in Thunderbolt, and then sort of weave your way back.
Slam on brakes, weave, do a U-turn.
Yeah, or you get away from the Thunderbolt police who are no doubt chasing you for speeding.
Right.
And then you find a way back there. But they've always had some of the best seafood in town. It's right out the boat.
But
Now-
it used to be a dump, but
Yeah.
but a hole in the wall
But a great dump.
Right.
with really good food. And now it is a really like the outside bar area, the outdoor
it's
bar.
a cool
was-
horseshoe bar. I mean, it's
Yeah.
big too. I mean, it got the big screens.
If you're a tourist to Savannah, turn this off.
Yeah, don't listen to this because we don't want you there. We're going to keep this to ourselves. But
And,
Yeah, it
the
was
food,
great.
The food was delicious. I know you said the popcorn shrimp appetizers.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
didn't get that. It was the first time I've gone there. I've gone there a couple times now since they've reopened, and it was the first time I'd been without getting the popcorn shrimp, and it's top 5 regret of my life.
Right. So I had the grouper fingers, which was actually a nice big grouper fillet. No complaint whatsoever. It
So
was like
good.
grouper hand, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
But
Grouper
it
farm.
was just delicious.
yeah, I had the shrimp basket. The shrimp was spot on.
Yeah.
Yeah, good fries. They've got a decent selection of beers and a full bar. They got inside seating if you're into that, but
TVs to watch the game on
Right.
a game day.
yeah, it's a nice breeze
Outside,
blowing.
they've got we got the hurricane.
Oh yeah, that was.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like a hurricane.
No, well,
compared to-
Milton was way south of us, but it was breezy. It's a blustery day.
It was.
But they got those.
Sheets.
Yeah, the not windows, but like plastic that'll roll down, and the
Yeah.
sort of a garage door style roll down. It be year round out
For
there.
when
It's
it
pretty
dips
good.
down into the freezing weather, like 40s.
Yeah, no, we just need to stay home at that point.
gotta chill just talking about it.
But that's my news. Is I really enjoyed Desposito's.
Yeah,
It's good news. It's good news. Y'all got your Halloween costumes yet?
I think Andrew's wearing his.
Yeah, Andrew is, for those not watching the video, Andrew showed up for work today in shorts, an athletic pullover shirt,
casual.
quarter zip, and baseball cap on backwards. So we're really embracing casual Friday at Bowen Painter.
Well, actually, we didn't rehearse this, but Andrew, what is on your baseball cap? What team are you repping there?
Well, I'm not repping the team, but it's the Boston Red Sox.
Very
cap.
defensive.
I am a Braves fan.
Hold on.
And foremost.
Is that the one that I got for your son?
It is. Yes. But
It does look good. I mean, it looks cool.
I mean, it looks cool, but I went to a Red Sox game this year, and I'm like, Woody Bowen would like this. He's a big baseball players, about to be 13, and it's like, it's a cool cap, and now you're wearing it.
Yeah, like
Good
he
daddy.
gave me permission. But in defense of myself as a Braves fan wearing a Boston Red Sox cap, I will have to say Fenway Park is one of the best places I've
icon.
ever been to
It's
see
awesome.
a game. And so in nostalgia of having been to a game there, I really like the hat that Paul brought to my son, and I have co-opted.
Hey, I feel like that's a point in parenthood that you've earned that right.
Well.
I'm early in my journey there, but
But back to my attire today, speaking of my son, they're on fall break. His school's on fall break. And so this morning, or last night before we went to bed, he said, "Dad, let's go play tennis in the morning." So I wasn't going to pass that up.
no.
So
Yeah.
Woody, my son, and I went and played tennis this morning before I came into work. And I just have not had a chance to change.
But what happened during that tennis game?
It was a really good tennis match,
Yeah,
Stephen.
I heard, and there was a result of a certain nature.
Well, he wanted to quit after one set.
I see. Are they still tallying the results?
He won. He was 7-5.
Good for you, Woody.
Yeah.
Andrew's a good tennis player, as I understand it. So.
Well, I'm okay. I haven't been playing that long, but I like to play a lot.
And Woody has.
Woody's been playing almost all
Woody
his
is
life.
a really special athlete too. So.
Yeah, and he's grown a lot the last few years. I mean, he's
and he's grown a lot. Seriously, he's big now.
Andrew's the divisional champion in the parent division for the
That's
household.
right. Now, did you take the tennis ball and bounce it against the back of his head after he beat you, kind of Great Zantini style?
I did not, but
I should have done that.
I'll do
Never
that
too
next
late.
time.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Write that down. Damn, that's true. Yeah, I don't have a lot of other new. I mean, the Halloween costume, Halloween decorations. So I put mine up. I think I was a little bit shell shocked after way underestimating Helene.
Right.
That I wasn't quite ready. I did get my grass mowed before Milton came through, but I looked at the models and everything said not much to be terribly concerned about for us up here, obviously for Tampa and the Central Florida area. I mean, really feel for them. But up here, it turned out to not be quite as bad as even I thought. But I didn't know what to think after Helene having just been a week or so before.
No, we hunted all over Savannah for a generator. You and I did to try to find a couple of generators, and fortunately we couldn't find it.
Yeah, it was a happy accident that didn't happen.
It's like, oh, I don't have to spend money. It worked out well.
But now the age old question of whole home generator or not, that is
They're gonna be popular this year. I'll tell you, that's gonna be the most popular Christmas present in Georgia and Florida.
Well, it might be worth considering. I mean, Generac is the name I think that everybody goes to, but there are others out there. Yeah, it might be worth taking a look at and seeing what to do. But whatever we did last time is not what I want to do again, which was go without power, no generator.
In Florida, they actually give a tax credit for people who put in whole home generators, and you can also the Florida FPL, Florida Power and Light, will help finance that you can pay it off on your power bill.
Really?
So on a power bill, you can pay for something you'll use, which is very different from my experience paying power bills.
But
you get to pay for a nuclear reactor that you get to use.
That's true. It did make a nice press release.
Yeah.
But I know this because my sister-in-law lives in West Palm Beach, and she put in a whole home generator. And the public policy is that Florida obviously has enough of these hurricanes come through that it creates quite a strain on the power grid and the power companies to get everybody back up and running. And the more people that can be self-sufficient in that situation, the easier it is on the state.
It makes sense.
The better it is for the state.
Well, that is an excellent segue. Talking about public policy to discussing tort reform, because it's filled with public policy. It's filled with myths, misconceptions. Maybe start talking a little bit about kind of what the idea is.
Well, let me start a little bit of history, okay?
Yeah.
So
You're tuned into the podcast where justice meets Southern hospitality. Broadcasting directly from Savannah, Georgia, join your hosts, Paul, Stephen, and Andrew of Bowen Painter Trial Lawyers as they chat about the legal difficulties you might face in everyday life. From the ports of Savannah to the busy highways that stretch through the southeast, we're your go-to source for all things legal. Served up with a dose of Southern charm and commitment to justice for y'all.
okay,
Yeah.
so tort law has been around since jolly old England, as we like to say. And
We need a button for that of some kind.
yeah, I don't know what that is.
Fife.
But
I don't know. That's kind of revolutionary. Yeah, we'll
Harry Potter, I don't know.
workshop
something.
that.
Yeah, we'll get that. Stay tuned for the next episode.
Nerd alert.
Yes. Hedwig.
So, but anyway, so tort law has been around for a long time and has been used for a while. But the idea of the tort lawyer or personal injury lawyer being something a lawyer focused on is a fairly new entity. Maybe, really started about the 60s and came into its own in the 70s and 80s. So in the 80s, you started seeing these larger verdicts. And, people focused on tort law and obviously the more money is in society, the more money people think of as things are worse. And so the 80s were a time of prosperity. And these tort lawyers who focused on it started getting these big verdicts. And the verdicts those days might have been $1 million, might have been $750,000. They're not what they are today, but neither is anything. But so the first round of tort reform came out in around 1986, 1987. and it was a kind of a national thing, as it always tends to be. And they passed these tort reform laws to try to prevent these verdicts from happening. And they usually kind of hit, they ready, shoot, aim, and doing these things. But so that happened in 1987, and then it happened again in the early 2000s nationwide, and it happened in Georgia in 2003. Was it 2003?
Yes.
Yeah. Because what happened is this was purely vengeful too, because at that point is when Sonny Perdue got elected governor, and the trial lawyers had been supporting Roy Barnes, who was a trial lawyer himself, a Democrat who was right when
And
Georgia was
trial lawyers is kind of synonymous
Yeah.
with this tort lawyer that you're talking about, right?
Yeah, well, people
Plaintiff
call
lawyers,
them
trial
injury
lawyers.
lawyers now. In those days, called them trial lawyers. But the injury lawyers, the trial lawyers, had really, the ones who were wealthy had really put all their weight behind Governor Barnes, and then the legislators who were Democrats, and the trial lawyers in those days were a very one party group. They're not anymore, and so when the Republicans took over in Georgia in the legislature and as governor, the first thing they did was pass Senate Bill 3. I mean, the third bill of the year, which was this big tort reform measure. And they really pride themselves on not having any lawyers involved in drafting the bill. And it wound up being kind of a disaster that has been dealt with ever since. So that's Georgia's history of it. And then there's been some attempts in recent years, but they really haven't come to pass for political reasons. But the idea of tort reform is businesses, typically big businesses and insurance companies, lobby legislatures, which have traditionally been Republican legislators, to put laws in place that will prevent them from being sued or prevent what they hope to be big verdicts against them. It's kind of the long and short of it.
And they put a cap on that basically and say that however much a person is injured doesn't matter. All that matters is if it's an injury, they can't get more than X dollars. Whether it's a death, a dismemberment. I mean, sometimes they'll have nuances and depending on the type. But
Right.
I mean, it comes down to it as saying we're going to draw a hard line across the board, regardless of the individual, that everyone cannot be compensated for an injury above a certain amount.
Well, they either put caps or they'll try to change the law to where it's harder to bring
Bring a case.
A case,
That's a good
yeah,
point. Yeah.
yeah.
So tort reform could come in a lot of ways. It could be I think about caps, but you're right. It could be eliminating a cause of action or creating additional procedural hurdles or shortening the time period,
Right.
things like that.
Well, let's start with first things first, okay? The problem that these...
I knew you wanted to know what the word tort meant.
Well,
And it comes from the French word wrong.
okay.
It's not Latin.
It's a romance language.
It's foreign.
It's foreign.
It's foreign.
It is also a delicious dessert, which is not wrong at all.
The question I want to ask, obviously, is nobody wants to be sued. And
Of
obviously
course.
nobody wants to have a large verdict entered against them. And so, from a purely self-interest point of view, you can't blame the Chamber of Commerce, businesses, insurance companies from wanting to cap what an individual can recover against.
And all of us have been on the defense side too, so it's not like
Yeah.
we haven't been there, at least understanding the interests.
But here's my question I want us to start with, because I think we could probably do multiple episodes on this topic. We're all passionate about it, and it is a current issue that needs to be talked about. And frankly, even though we do have a viewpoint, I think we're right in our viewpoint. But the question is, are big verdicts a problem in the state of Georgia? Are they negatively affecting business in the state of Georgia?
Georgia has been named the best state in the country to do business for the last 9 years by various various groups.
And
Georgia business, I mean, Georgia is what people look to in the country of a solid economy, well-managed government, and a booming economy. We're drawing in more and different innovative businesses that employ thousands and thousands of people all the time, and it's with our current laws. So there have been a lot of big verdicts in Georgia and across the country, but in Georgia in the last several years. But it is not scaring off businesses. It is not affecting business in Georgia objectively based on the number of businesses coming to do business in Georgia.
Well, when a big verdict happens, isn't the business or even could be an individual, although most big verdicts are against businesses, aren't they in danger of being put out of business by that?
Well, usually not, because they're insured. I mean, some are self-insured, and some businesses that are self-insured are so massive that a $10 million verdict to a $1 billion business is not enough to really throw them off at all for the year. So it is not going to affect every business, this big verdicts. But one thing to remember too is how you get to the verdict, okay? Because it's not as if no one has tried to resolve the case and then this jury goes and run away and this poor business is left there and they couldn't have done anything about it, or insurance company. These cases take years and they're fought hard on both sides. A lot of money is spent defending and prosecuting the case. There are opportunities in all of these cases. Every single verdict you see, there has been an opportunity for the company to settle the case for probably far less than the verdict winds up being. It's usually, 10% of what you see the verdict being, the plaintiff will say, we will accept this lower amount, and they say no. And so then they roll the dice and they go to court, and the jury sees it the way the plaintiff sees it and awards a big number.
In most cases, where there is an insurance policy, and that is most cases,
yeah,
the plaintiff's lawyer at some point will make a demand for those policy limits,
right?
Whether it's $500,000 or $1 million or $25,000,
right?
Yeah.
The insurance lawyer, and for several reasons, the plaintiff's lawyer inevitably is going to say, okay, we will take your $500,000 policy and settle this case.
Even if the case is worth, even if it's economic damages of multi-millions, because that is the money that's available and for the insurance, and say okay, well, this is, it is what it is. We'll take what you have.
And what happens if they don't do that? And they know that they've got a case that's worth way more than the $500,000 policy limit. But how difficult is it to get money out of a company that's not insured? I mean, that's an evaluation factor in cases that we look at.
It depends on the company.
It does.
Most businesses in this country are small to medium-sized businesses.
Right.
And if they don't have insurance or don't have enough insurance and they're facing a multi-million-dollar verdict, it's very easy for them to file bankruptcy, which is no fun for anybody. But they, Chapter 11 business reorganization bankruptcy allows them to shed a lot of that debt and come out of it on the other side as a healthy company. And
it's a business tool. I mean, bankruptcy does kind of have a negative association with it, but really, if you talk to people who practice in this area and companies that go through it, a lot of the big companies in our country have been through bankruptcy because it was exactly what you said. It's just a reorganization of debts, and a tort judgment is a debt.
Right.
But as plaintiffs' lawyers, we don't ever want the company to go into bankruptcy.
No.
That does nothing good for our client.
Absolutely.
Why do we want a company to go into bankruptcy? We want to make our client as whole as possible with the assets available to make the client whole. So destroying a company.
Justice for good people.
But
ASAP.
Yeah, that's our mission.
But back to your question, for big businesses, multi-billion-dollar businesses, if you get a big verdict against them, it's probably going to be collectible,
right?
And it's not going to put them out of business.
And that's the important point. In the evaluation, I think a good plaintiff's lawyer is looking at that. Okay, it's a GM or whatever. Not to disparage GM, but just take them as a very big company they get sued for things that they do wrong. But if it's a mom and pop hardware store where there's a slip and fall, more likely than not, the plaintiff's lawyer is going to advise their client to go with whatever the insurance is.
Correct.
And it is good business practice to have an insurance policy in place for that purpose. That's the whole purpose of insurance.
And usually for a mom and pop hardware store, they're going to have a commercial general liability policy, and usually it's going to be $1 million policy.
Yep.
So let's say that someone
which covers most claims. I mean, it's rare that it's going to be more than $1 million.
But let's just say, take an example of real world example. Someone is in the store, the racks are high, way overhead, and something heavy is not stored properly on that rack, and it falls and hits somebody on the head, and causes a brain injury. That's happened. We've had that case. The value of the case, I mean, just the person's medical care for future, because they're now severely brain damaged, and it's a freak kind of accident, but it happens, is going to exceed that $1 million policy. Just the real world harm to that person exceeds the insurance policy. But as plaintiff's lawyers, we know that we are going to have a hard time ever collecting more than the insurance policy. So we have to give the insurance company a chance to settle the case for the $1 million, and we demand it. And hopefully the insurance company
takes care of their insured like they're supposed to be doing,
and they settle the case. If they don't, then we go to trial, and if we get a big verdict, let's say we get a $25 million verdict, and the headlines are going to be mom and pop hardware store gets hit with $25 million verdict, and people are going to be, man, that's awful. That hardware store is going to, that mom and pop are going to go out of business.
But that's not really what happens.
That's just the headline.
Correct.
But what's going to actually happen?
So what actually happens is there's law in Georgia, insurance bad faith or negligent claims handling, to where the mom and pop are going to have a claim against their insurance company for the excess verdict. In other words, they had $1 million policy. Now they have $24 million that's uninsured because the insurance company didn't settle the case when they should have. The insurance company now is going to owe them their damages, which is $24 million or more. Sometimes you can have punitive damage in there.
Because the insurance company owes their insured the hardware store.
Duty.
Fiduciary duty.
A fiduciary duty is the most, righteous duty under the law. It is a greater duty than the parent-child relationship. So the insurance company owes their insured that level of duty. And they often play a little fast and loose to try to save money on claims. And it winds up, again, with these big verdicts, things they should pay.
Right.
Because we don't have to give them two chances. We say, give us your policy limits. And they say, no, and they try to be cute about it. Well, it's like, all right, we'll go to trial. And then we go to trial and we get a big verdict. The insurance company just goes, oh, well, here's $1 million. But that's not the way it actually plays out.
Two things about that $25 million verdict. One, it never should have happened.
Never should have happened.
Because the insurance company should have settled for their policy limits, which would have ended the case.
And can I just say, it should have probably happened years earlier, too, as it takes so long to get to trial. And these plaintiffs who've been terribly injured are just trying to get through or go in on government assistance. Right. So the taxpayers are paying for them when they should have been paid by the insurance company of the wrongdoer maybe 3 or 4 years before they even get to this point.
Second point about that $25 million verdict. As plaintiffs' lawyers, we are not going to then roll up to the hardware store with the sheriff and say, we're foreclosing on this property.
Bring me out all the hammers.
Right.
You're going to liquidate your hammers, sir.
What we will do instead, and what we have done, is go to that defendant who now has that verdict and say, listen, we're not going to come after you. We're not going to come after your assets. You can assign us your claim against your insurance company, or sign an agreement with us that you will pursue the claim against your insurance company and turn the proceeds over to us.
Right.
And so then it's the insurance company who made the bad decision not to settle the case, who ultimately is on the hook for that.
Exactly.
And it's the insurance companies, their job is to manage this risk. That is the whole reason they exist. That's how they make money. So what we're talking about here is not some hardware store that's just trying to make a living selling tools and supplies you need for your home. This is the insurance company's job. And now the insurance companies are also a lot behind a lot of this tort reform stuff.
I disagree with you what you just said. The insurance company's job is to make money for their shareholders.
That, you know what, you're right.
And that's what's problematic is because they have fiduciary duty to their shareholders.
Right.
Under the law, they have a fiduciary duty to
I
their
gave too much
shareholders
credit.
to make a money, and a fiduciary duty to their insured. Well, guess one has the most pull.
That the one that shows up on the NASDAQ or whatever publicly exchanged.
Exactly. I mean, like that.
exchange.
It's so they may lose. They may have to pay, even if they have to pay $20 million extra to their insured, which would be extreme.
They
It's
made that
usually $1
yesterday
million
in
or
the-
something like that.
their
What
market.
their shareholders are putting in is much bigger numbers. So they're more like they have an inherent conflict in the way they have to do business. But to your point, they're the ones, along with big business who are self-insured, who are advancing tort reform the most because they want to save money. So let's talk about this.
All right.
Does it save money? Does it save you in your car insurance and your business insurance? Does it save you premiums if tort reform is passed?
No.
No, it does not. That was looked at. There was a study done in Texas because there was a big tort reform in 2002, 2003. And one of the big things was medical
basically
malpractice.
The insurance companies and Chamber of Commerce got exactly what they wanted in
Yeah.
Texas.
Yeah, and it was and medical malpractice was the area, and they really said, well, these doctors are leaving the state because these insurance premiums are too high, yada yada yada. So they passed this really draconian tort reform, and they looked a few years later and said, have the premiums gone down? And they hadn't.
Nope.
They'd continue on the same track upward they have because the insurance company is about making money, not saving their insurance money. So it doesn't actually work is the point.
Right.
So if it worked, they would have an argument. I'll give them that. If there is a state interest in having doctors stay in your state and making sure it's not too expensive. And so if that had worked, there would at least be a counter argument
Right.
to the tort reform, but it doesn't work, and it
Doesn't
never
have-
has worked.
And that's because, to your point, the insurance company's job is to not make it as cheap as possible for you to pay for insurance. Their job is to make more money
Right.
for their shareholders.
Yeah, the profits
Get
went
as
up in
much
the
as they
insurance
can
companies.
for premiums.
Right.
And before the tort reform passed, they knew their customers were paying X amount in premiums.
Yeah.
And then the other side of the money making equation for them is paying out as little possible in claims.
Right.
So they were able to minimize what they were paying out in claims through tort reform, but they already knew their customers could pay these premiums, so why lower them?
Well, and also, what else? What are they doing with this money? So they get paid premiums. It
They're
goes in their bank
investing
account.
it in the stock market.
That's exactly
Yeah.
right.
That's where there's a lot of money from insurance companies, billions, per company sometimes,
Yes,
in investments. Their investment accounts is where they make their money.
and they
Not
haven't.
paying claims.
They're heavily regulated too, so they have obligations to keep certain reserves based on
Right.
all these complicated factors about the risks they're exposed to. But they want to make that risk pool as small as absolutely possible.
That's right.
So they can take that rest of that money and put it in the
And
market.
if they cap what an injured person can receive, no matter what that person's real life issues are and what their family has to go through, then they don't have to keep as high a reserve and they can put more money in a risky investment.
And Andrew,
So we've talked about one way that a big verdict, a headline grabbing verdict, isn't necessarily a death sentence. It isn't a end to the business that's on the receiving end of that verdict. There's another way or another reason that these verdicts are very often not a disaster for the defendant in these cases. And I feel a little bit trite in using this example, but it is a perfect example because it is somewhat well known. But the McDonald's hot
Hot
coffee
coffee.
case brings all of these issues to bear. So in that case, and if you haven't seen the documentary Hot Coffee, I think it's still available on YouTube, Amazon. It's available.
It's
on
out
streaming.
there.
It's out
You wanna
there.
see it.
Yeah, it's great.
You should watch it because it's really eye opening. But among other things, let's get past the fact that the poor lady had a real painful, severe injury.
And let's
Yeah, maybe just the
let's
facts.
start over because this happened in 1994. Some of our listeners may not even remember that or been around to remember this. So the case was Stella Lieback versus McDonald's restaurants, and goes back to verdict in 1994. And Stella was a 79-year-old woman. And she went to McDonald's and she ordered a cup of coffee, I believe in the drive-thru.
Correct.
And at the time, this McDonald's was keeping their coffee extra hot, like 190 degrees hot.
Okay, just why would they keep the coffee that hot?
As
Because
I
it lasts
recall,
longer.
well,
Does it last?
you don't get refills as often.
Well,
It takes longer to drink, so you don't come back and get refills.
and it makes it so that they don't have to remake it as often, so that they don't have to make as much as frequently, which saves
Money.
So
Okay,
she gets
sorry.
this, and she takes off the lid to put her creamer in, or wherever it was, and in doing so, it spills in her groin area.
And she's sitting in a car seat.
She's in a car seat and winds up getting third-degree burns down her
Really
thighs.
sensitive area.
Yeah, and in the movie, you
You
go
can see
online, you can
pictures.
see the burns.
And
They're really bad.
It's horrific.
Yeah, and so she tried to settle with McDonald's for $20,000 to cover her medical expenses. Okay,
So she agreed that if McDonald's pay her $20,000, the case is over.
right.
Yeah, she just wanted her bills paid.
And they refused. So she filed a suit in federal court in the U.S. District Court in New Mexico, where she lived. And the case went all the way to trial. It mediated at one point, and the mediator suggested a settlement for $225,000. I think Stella was at $300 in her negotiation, but McDonald's refused either number, and so they went on to trial.
Do we know if Stella agreed to that number or not?
I don't know.
Okay.
I think she was at 300, but I don't know if
That's
they
pretty
got
close.
to that point. Yeah, it probably would have settled. And so the jury came back with an award of $200,000 in compensatory damages. In other words, $200,000 for
Her pain and
for
suffering.
her pain and suffering,
her
her
medical
medical bills,
bills.
that kind of stuff.
Maybe future
To make
care.
her whole. That's what compensatory means, to make her whole. And then $2.7 million in punitive damages to McDonald's, which equals 2 days of sales of McDonald's coffee. Because they made,
Well,
that's how much they would make
why
in 2
would they
days.
want to punish McDonald's for this?
Well, they found out that McDonald's was purposely keeping their coffee too hot for some of the reasons we talked
Well,
about.
who says it's too hot?
Well, they went to the other coffee makers, the national, I forget what they're called, but like there's a group that's of coffee brewers.
Some expert of
Yeah,
some.
some experts. And coffee should be at a certain level, maybe 170 degrees, which is hot enough to brew it and have the taste come out, but not hot enough to
I brew my coffee
burns.
at
Yeah.
203 degrees to start. By the time I drink it, it's about 170, 180 degrees.
Okay.
That's very specific. But the point is the industry
Industry standard. Yeah.
standard had determined that the temperature at which they were keeping it, 190 what degrees?
190-ish, yeah.
190 degrees, was not fit for human consumption. That coffee at that temperature was not fit. It was not drinkable.
And McDonald's does sell
Now-
coffee to humans. That's
now-
kinda-
And the evidence also showed that McDonald's was well aware that it wasn't drinkable, and it had report after report,
Like
after
700 reports that this coffee is too hot in the like a year
report,
or two
burning
prior
people's
to this,
mouths,
yeah.
burning their hands. Any place it is spilled.
So it was dangerous. They had not knowledge it was dangerous, and they kept doing it.
So she got this verdict. How much was
Now-
it, Paul?
It was $207 million in punitives, $200,000 in compensatory, but the jury had what's called apportionment.
was it 207 million or
No, that was
2.7.
2.7 million?
2.7.
Okay.
2.7 million, punitive and compensatory.
And so they had what's called apportionment. In other words, if a plaintiff is partially to blame for their injuries, the jury can say, well, she's this much at fault and they're this much at fault, and that's the way that it comes out. So the jury found her 20% at fault because she put the coffee in her legs and decided to do that there instead of, I guess, a cup holder. And so the jury said, well, that was a little bit negligent. We're going to blame 20% of this on her. So the entire verdict gets written down 20%.
Mhm.
So McDonald's doesn't have to pay for the portion that was her fault. So it goes down. And as I recall, I don't have this in my notes, but I recall the court actually even wrote down the verdict a little bit more, as courts are allowed to do in many states. And that's how it came to be. So there was a lot of facts, there was a lot of opportunities for McDonald's to do the right thing, and there was a lot of problems with their coffee. and it was a really bad injury. She was in the hospital for 8 days and had to get a skin graft. I mean, it wasn't like just a little burn and then you go get $1 million.
The headline was essentially
coffee burn gets
right
$3 million.
Woman spills coffee on herself and gets a $2.7 million verdict. The reality is that it was a legitimate case that she would have settled for $20,000
or maybe $225.
And after that $2.7 million, it was written down by the court, and they call that remediature. The court says, that's too much for this case. And so the verdict headline is $2.7 million. The end result in this case, if I'm not wrong, was less than $1 million.
Yeah, that's right. I'm trying to find the exact amount.
But it's far less than the headline amount.
Correct. And that is typical. Our friend Jim Butler got a $100+ million verdict against Jeep Chrysler for an explosion when a Jeep was rear-ended and had a rear gas tank, which was dangerous.
The products case.
And so when someone rear-ended it, the car basically exploded, and a young child strapped in a car seat burned to death. He got a $100+ million verdict, and on post-trial motions, $140 million post-trial motions, that verdict was greatly reduced.
The judge wrote down to about 40, I think.
I think that's right.
So I found it now. It's the judge wrote down the punitive damages to $400 in the McDonald's case.
Yeah, back to McDonald's.
Sorry, $480,000, which is 3 times the compensatory damages. So the total amount was $640,000. So it's a $640,000 verdict for 8 days in the hospital and a skin graft for a burn from a drink that shouldn't have been a burn that McDonald's knew about, which is much more reasonable. Whether you agree with the verdict or not, it's much more reasonable than what happened in the aftermath was the U.S. Chamber of Commerce took this and they publicized it to the news as woman spills hot coffee, gets $3 million.
Right.
And to say the tort system's out of control, it's not working, where actually all the things between the apportionment and the remediator worked exactly like it should work.
The system worked and make
right.
it just.
And if the jury awarded too much in the way of punitive damages, an amount that was unconstitutional, actually,
Right.
we can get into that in a different time, and the judge wrote it down to an amount that was constitutional and fair and within the boundaries of the law. So the tort system worked, but the news cycle did not.
The PR was the problem. No, I mean, I think that the takeaways from this are, one, tort reform does not lower your premiums. It doesn't make insurance cheaper for you. Insurance companies have an inherent conflict of interest, and they often, if not always, put their interests ahead of yours in investing the money and making sure their shareholders get the return on investment. 3, individuals get compensated through the system working. There are a lot of mechanisms to make sure that these things are just. It's not just person walks into McDonald's, orders coffee they know is hot, spills it on themselves, and then walks away with a windfall. It's person actually injured receives a result against a company who made a decision based purely on profit, knowing all of the problems, but they decide, you know what? No, as a policy, we want this coffee to be hotter because it makes us more money, and it ends up hurting this person. They get a judgment against them, and then the judge and the jury work together to come to a result that is just.
And what's the result? The New York Times did a study in 2013 that found that McDonald's had lowered its coffee temperature to 170 to 180 degrees, which is the difference between
third-degree burns
and good hot coffee, basically.
And they did that because of tort lawyers.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. These things do make a difference. And if you have any doubt about that, read Unsafe at Any Speed, which is about the Chevy Corvair, and which was a terribly made vehicle that has hurt a whole bunch of people, including a friend of ours we talked about. But tort lawyers have made the car you drive right now significantly safer. It just has. I
They
mean,
make companies think.
You think seatbelts would be in your car if it wasn't for liability?
Or airbags.
Or airbags? I mean, there are so many things, or the position of your gas tank so you don't burn up if something happens.
Rear ends, yeah.
The Ford Pinto is not around anymore for a reason. You know, there are...
It was also ugly, but...
Well, a lot of reasons,
and
I
deadly.
guess. That's fair. But anyway, so...
Look, guys, I've got to wrap this up. I've got somewhere to go. I think we could have a whole nother episode, and I hope we do,
Yeah.
talking
this
about
issue,
tort reform.
yeah.
Sorry, I get a little passionate about this one because it's so.
No, I'm
Paul's
with
as passionate about tort reform as I am.
Before we
about
sign
originals
off-
in Latin.
Before we sign off, who can tell me why a leopard cannot hide?
Because he always
Can't
gets
spot it.
spotted.
Because they're always spotted.
Oh, I'm 2 for 2.
Strong. Am I strong?
Write that down.
All right, guys. Thank you. And enjoyed another episode of Just for Y'all, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Justice for Y'all, hosted by the attorneys here at Bowen Painter Trial Lawyers in Savannah, Georgia. If today's episode resonated with you, or if you find yourself needing legal guidance, remember, we're just a call away. You don't have to work through the difficulties of your situation alone. Visit our website at bowenpainter.com, that's BOWENPAINTER.com, or give us a call at 912-335-1909. We're here to serve you with the dedication and warmth only true Southern hospitality can offer. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform so you don't miss an episode. And tell your friends and family about us if they're ever in need of some legal insight. Take care, and remember that at Bowen Painter Trial Lawyers, we're committed to justice for y'all.